I've always been rather fond of books. In fact, I think they're just about the most important things we've ever created, the building blocks of our civilization. So, when someone suggested a journey in search of the genius who invented the printing press, I jumped at the chance.
My lord, is this it? This is it?
This was the man who launched the first media revolution and opened the door to the modern age. But his story is shrouded in mystery. So to get closer to him, we also decided to stage an experiment and build our own medieval printing press.
So beautiful.
That meant getting to grips with the tools and technology of the 15th century.
Don't do that, Stephen.
And actually making some of the ingredients with my own bare hands.
This takes me back to the archery school where I was always a dunderhead.
As it turned out, that was the most revealing bit of all.
I feel connected to Gutenberg somehow just by doing this.
So, here it is then, the slightly more hands-on than I expected story of Johannes Gutenberg and his marvelous machine.
Well, if you're anything like as old as me, you may well remember this, the John Bull printing outfit, made in England. This was where I got my first experience of how printing works, really. And simple as it is, these little rubber bits here tell you all you need to know about printing with movable type. You've got ink. Ooh, there it is. Oh, I'm going to get my fingers dirty already. There are lots of different letters, and you can rearrange them in any way you want onto one of these, which I think is called a form. And then when you print out, it's exactly the same every time. You can have hundreds, thousands, millions of pages that are identical. And there we are. Of course, the point about it being movable type is that I can move these letters into any order, make another word, not unlike Scrabble. So I'm going to mess around. What am I going to get? There we are. So how is it took mankind so long to bring together these simple elements into one machine that could make books?
The breakthrough was made by a man called Johannes Gutenberg more than 500 years ago. His printing machine was the most revolutionary advance in technology since the invention of the wheel. And we're still living with its consequences today, as you can see here in the basement of the British Library, where they hold a copy of every book published in English.
You know, there are 14 miles of shelves here. There are another 8 miles added every year as 3 million new books come on stream in British. And above me, all the readers demanding their books have little idea that there's this labyrinth of shelves here.
It was the invention of the printing press which started all this, making mass production of books possible for the first time in history. Within a few years, there were millions of them in circulation. And as they travelled, they carried their precious cargo of new ideas or theories, philosophy or propaganda to every part of Europe and beyond, sowing the seeds for that great cultural blossoming we call the Renaissance.
The fruit of Gutenberg's work can be seen all around us, but it's more important than that. For everything that our culture and our civilization depends on starts with Gutenberg's invention.
And this was his calling card, one of the first and finest books created using his new machine. To the modern eye, the Gutenberg Bible opens a window onto a vanished world of monks and monasteries. But when it first appeared in the 1450s, it was viewed not as a reminder of the past, but as a signpost to the future, glittering proof that a new information age was dawning in Europe, fueled by the power of the printed word. I want to find out how and why Gutenberg invented his machine. To answer the how question, I'm planning a unique experiment. And here's the laboratory where it's all going to happen.
In you come.
This workshop in the heart of England may not look very high-tech. That's because the job I have in mind requires 15th century materials and techniques, and a man who spent a lifetime investigating the first printing pioneers. Step forward, Alan May.
So this is where you're going to attempt to build a printing press, is that right, Alan?
Well, that's the idea, yes.
But not any old press. I want a fully operational Gutenberg-style one. There aren't any surviving machines from this early period, and no one's ever discovered an illustration of what they looked like. So Alan has his work cut out.
Well, essentially, this is uncharted territory. It's a detective story, if you like.
Right.
The earliest illustration of a printing press is the Danse Macabre, 1499.
That's about 50 years after Gutenberg started his printing, isn't it? So, and things evolved pretty quickly once.
That's right. I think that this early period was actually quite revolutionary. There were things changing all the time. It took off rather like the internet has now. You know, it really went whoop.
Yes.
Alan reckons that Gutenberg's press did share some family traits with later machines.
All printing presses up to about 1800 have a central part which pushes down onto the type. There's a piston and platen assembly. And the other thing that is required in any press of this sort is that you have some means of transporting the printing surface and the paper under that platen.
Right, so you've got a slidey bit moving along here, and then you've got a flat platen, you call it,
coming down there.
and that presses down. And
But there's one crucial difference between Gutenberg's original and later so-called common presses, such as the one this model's based on.
To print on a press like this, they put 2 pages of type on this stone here.
Right.
It's a very heavy stone, about 100 weight.
Goodness.
And then the process of printing was a double process. You wound in for the first page to just there and operated the lever, which made the platen go down. You then release it partly and wind it into the next page and print again. Hence the term two-pull press.
Forensic analysis of Gutenberg's original Bible reveals that he only printed 1 page at a time. In other words, his was a one-pull press. That will influence the size and design of Alan's experimental machine, which is already starting to take shape in another corner of the workshop.
Right, here we go. Now, what if you pass me the mallet and chisel?
Oh, Lord, yes, here we go.
Woodwork was never my strongest subject at school, but no one seems to have told Alan that.
The trick is to not use the whole width of the chisel.
Right.
To use as just about a third of the so that enables you to steer it. Better to be shallow than too steep. So if it's too shallow, you can just pare it down by hand. Okay? Right, have a go.
Oh my goodness, you may regret this. I don't want to ruin it.
Now,
oh, I say.
Right, about a third there, like that.
That way.
Come on, courage. That's pretty good.
Oh wow! It's very pleasing. It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
It is. I get the feeling you're trying to reveal a fossil coming out of a rock.
Yes, it is. Oh, I hope that wasn't too deep.
No, yeah, it's fine.
It's an extraordinary thing that you create something like a mechanical part literally out of your hands. Well, there you are.
Well, that's jolly
If you
good.
could just finish that off for me. About yay big.
When Alan's finished the press, I want to print a replica page of the original Gutenberg Bible. That means I'll also need to track down some other ingredients, including movable type and 15th century paper. But first, I have a journey to make. I'll be travelling through the Silicon Valley of medieval Europe to explore the places where Gutenberg and his team developed the machine which shaped the modern world. My first port of call is Mainz, on the banks of the Rhine in western Germany. This was Gutenberg's birthplace and the city where he spent his childhood. But despite first appearances, only a few traces of the medieval city that Gutenberg grew up in still survive.
This is the birthhouse of Gutenberg.
A chemist shop. Oh, yes.
You can read it?
Here stands Gutenberg's birthhouse. And Gutenberg is the name of his family?
No, actually the name of his family was Gänsfleisch.
GänseFleisch,
Yeah.
which means
Goose meat.
Goose.
Meat. I always say, who wants to run
Bizarre.
around with the name of goose meat in his life?
Just around the corner is the church where he was probably baptized. Well, part of it at least. Mainz was heavily bombed in the Second World War, so the medieval remains of St. Christopher's are now bolstered by some post-war concrete.
So it's been left like this deliberately as a memorial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of a printer, you think of fonts, and this must be a 7,000 point font. But it's terrific to see. Oh, and there's a plaque to him.
Well, it tells Johannes Gutenberg.
Yeah, now something I wanted to talk to you about actually. Mainz, the city of Mainz proclaimed in the year 2000 that it was his 600th anniversary, so they think he was born in 1400.
Well, that was decided on publicly, actually 1900, when they made already the same fuss about this centennial at this time, and then they decided Gutenberg was born 1400. But the exact date is somewhere between 1397 and 1404.
Well, I have to say I slightly agree with the city of Mainz. I think 1400 is a good year to describe his birth, not because it's a round number, but because it's actually the year that Geoffrey Chaucer died in England.
Oh.
So it was the end of one age, if you like, the age of the medieval writer, and the beginning of a new age, the early Renaissance.
There's very little evidence about Gutenberg's early years in Mainz. We know his mother owned some land and that his father was a merchant whose work brought him into contact with the city's goldsmiths, expert metalworkers with skills which Gutenberg would later find very useful. And it's likely that he studied at university, so he'd have come into contact with books, unlike most of his contemporaries. But that's about as far as it goes. It's like catching the occasional glimpse of a figure in a crowd, only to watch him melt away a few moments later. And even when you finally come face to face with the great man, you can't be sure you're looking at the real Mr. Gutenberg.
So whether or not Gutenberg had three hands, like this one here, whether or not he looked like David Tennant as Doctor Who, or whether or not he had a beard shaped like a fish stuck to his face, one thing's certain, we don't actually know what Johannes Gutenberg looked like at all. And that gives us great scope. Perhaps he looked like you. Or me. Unlikely. He would have been burnt if he looked like me.
No one knows exactly when the elusive Gutenberg first dreamed of building his printing machine. But this was a revolutionary idea in the handmade world of the 15th century.
We're so used to living with printed matter every day of our lives, from the cereal packet in the morning to the book at bedtime, that it might perhaps be rather hard to imagine what the world was like before printing. So we have to come somewhere like here, this monastery, Kloster Eberbach, in a village just a few miles from Mainz, where Gutenberg grew up. And this is where not the printed word, but the written word was king.